feels like we're in the pre-Horizon days of Modern, with a standard legal set actually making a difference in adding a new deck to the format. Alongside Energy, Eldrazi, and Dimir, we got a new addition thanks to Khans of Tarkir, especially if you've been paying attention to the top results in the Modern metagame. Cori-Steel Cutter is the latest artifact that provides so many good keywords for an aggressive deck, but also the angle of resiliency that many of these decks strive for. Reading a 1/1 body is no joke, especially when the Cori-Steel gets equipped to it in a deck that's able to cast multiple spells a turn for very good reason. And that's what I wanted to talk about today, the latest edition of Izzet Prowess in the Modern metagame. Take a look at what the deck does, maybe go over some of its strengths and weaknesses and how we can look to tackle it. For more content like this, looking over the Modern metagame, subscribe and leave a like on the video. Let me know what you want to see next, but for now, let's hop right into the archetype. Now, the central reason this archetype is coming back, and honestly, I feel like this artifact itself is super underexplored right now, especially because it's only being used in one archetype for now, is Cori-Steel Cutter. Red and 1 for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has trample and haste. A lot of great keywords here. So immediately getting that additional boost is great. Trample and haste is important as well. But the flurry part of it is that key bit, that part that's putting it over the edge and providing that resiliency. So whenever you cast your second spell each turn, create a 1/1 white monk creature token with prowess. You may attach this equipment to it. So the monk token, goated. The fact that it has prowess on top of it is icing on the cake. You have a 2/2 with haste and trample with prowess every turn. So you get that ability to not only be offensive, but also defensive, because it's whenever you cast a second spell on each turn. So you could reactively create one with maybe like a lava dart and a lightning bolt, and then all of a sudden you got a monk on defense with a little bit of prowess. Obviously, you used up those spells. Those prowess triggers will not go onto the monk, but the Cori-Steel Cutter then gets attached onto this. And so you can, kind of do that through multiple turns. So for example, if you were playing this in Commander, you could create one on each turn and keep going from there if you were able to abuse it with something like that. So definitely a really cool card in the way it's worded, but getting those on your turn is so powerful. The card just being a really easy equip in the late game is also really nice. There is a situation, obviously, with like Dragon's Rage Channelers and stuff, where you fed out your graveyard, you have a 3/3 with flying, so giving it trample and haste and making it a 4/4 is pretty decent as well. So there is value in equipping it onto something else. So something like that is really important. Just note that the artifact itself is what's giving haste. It's not like the monks come in with haste. So if you were to take this equipment off, just remember that token cannot attack. Just remember as you're working out your math when you're going into combat. Now, if we take a look at the Modern metagame itself, generally speaking, it's kind of like 50-50. Like, so you see Izzet Prowess here in the top 10 decks. Then if you go to 14 days, it jumps up to top 5. If you go to 7 days, it's just the second most played deck out there. And really, you're looking at the decks that are faster than this, and you're looking at the decks that can control it. So generally speaking, something like Boros Energy is going to be really good against this. It has a lot of removal tacked onto it and a lot of ways to just answer various parts of the strategy. Eldrazi Ramp is actually a really good matchup for Izzet Prowess. It can just really get underneath and really fast ahead of the Eldrazi player. And so the Eldrazi player, generally speaking, is going to suffer, especially if a lot of the colorless players right now, not all of them, but there are some amount, there's a non-zero amount of Tron decks, I should say, running around trying out the new Ugin. So as long as that's going on for the first like 2-3 weeks of the Modern format, people trying to figure out where that Ugin lands, then Izzet Prowess is going to have a couple of more good matchups. Now, Dimir Murktide is going to be a better matchup into the Izzet Prowess decks because they're going to have some control, a little bit of removal. But Ruby Storm, honestly, might actually be good as well, just being faster than this, depending on the type of hate that Izzet Prowess can see. In terms of the other decks, like you're looking at Belcher, which can be a little bit slow. Like if you're not running removal and your plan is to be aggressive, Izzet Prowess can generally probably just be more aggressive than you. So again, it tends to be a little bit more 50-50 from what I'm seeing in the current metagame. Izzet Prowess can get really fast, really crazy, and really out of control, especially in the mid game if you're having to deal with this Cori-Steel Cutter and you don't have a good removal spell for it. Now, when you look at the central core of this deck, we're going to take a look at two lists. This one got second place in a recent Modern challenge. Dragon's Rage Channel, like even if we look at just core cards here, going down by percentages here, most of the decks are, they're all playing Monastery Swiftspear. 98% of them are playing 4 copies of Dragon Rage Channeler, and there's some level of either 3 to 4 copies of Slick Shot Show Off. Slick Shot's really nice because it just, on turn 2, you can just have it be that free spell. On turn 3, you can just go off with a bunch of cards. You can go off with like a Cori-Steel and all that stuff. So something like this, like you could play the Slick Shot on 3, play the Cori-Steel, and then play a second spell that will then trigger the Cori-Steel because that's the second spell on your turn. So if you play like a 1-mana spell, that means that you have 2 non-creature spells on your Slick Shot. You probably already play like a Monastery Swiftspear on turn 1, and then you have like a 2/2 flying haste on your Cori-Steel, and you're swinging in for a bunch with trample haste in the air, like whatever it might be. So there's a lot of aggression that you get out of this deck. There's a lot of selection too. Expressive Iteration is a decent option as well. Preordained for a little bit of selection. You have Violent Urge as well. So target creature gets +1/+0, gains first strike until the end of turn, so helps with that combat. So yes, you are going to be able to trample over some things, but being able to efficiently block off or just attack into some X2s, X1s is going to be really powerful. And then if there are 4 more card types among cards in your graveyard, that creature also gains double strike. So a soft TBR kind of impression there. Mutagenic growth, some number of copies of 3 to 4. Regardless, a lot of aggression, and of course a lot of ways to trigger the Cori-Steel. So you have the Cori-Steel as key here, but Mishra's Bauble as well, not only to feed Delirium but also act as second spells. Delirium is important for the Dragon's Rage Channeler, and just so many different ways that you can abuse things like this out of the sideboard. So you're gonna have some number, the Surveil lands are gonna be there, your basic land package. Out of the sideboard, you have some number of ways to deal with bigger threats, but also some number of ways to just deal with graveyard threats as well. So Consigned Memory is going to be for the Eldrazi decks. Magebane Lizard is going to be for the Storm players and the combo players. Torpor, you can imagine Surgical Extraction is probably going to be somewhere between a 3 to 4 of. It's saying 2 of in terms of 57% of decks. I feel like this has to be like a lot more powerful. Surgical Extraction just being that free spell is really good. It was a really good sideboard card in the Phoenix decks, and there were versions of Phoenix that were playing the Prowess package. It was just Prowess with Faithless Looting and Phoenix in there because you could just get off a lot of free spells, and Surgical was a part of that. Tormod's Crypt, Alpine Moon, Meltdown. Unholy Heat is actually kind of interesting here. You do need to feed Delirium. The big problem is these decks are going to have a real hard time dealing with bigger bodies. You're thinking Primeval Titan, Phlages, and just big Eldrazi. So Unholy Heat is like the real thing out of the board to be able to deal with something like that. But even then, it can be a little tough to deal with. But this is also the type of deck where if you don't have like incidental graveyard hate, you almost like don't really want to bring it in, because it's really tough to justify against an aggro deck. You're looking at removal and life gain. Do you have the room to bring in all that graveyard hate to stop the Delirium shenanigans on the Dragon's Rage Channeler or on the Lava Darts themselves? Lava Darts tend to be that big killer for me. As a mill player, this just looks like, at the end of the day, this just looks like a list that Tasha's Hideous Laughter can get a lot of value out of. But I cannot underestimate the power of just mulling to something like Fatal Push or some type of removal and having graveyard hate for Lava Darts to overcome something like that. Regardless, this is where that package ultimately lands. And then if you take a look at even this 8th place list from a recent Modern Challenge on the 28th here, like Izzet Prowess, the same package, the land base is actually a little bit different. Sideboard's a little bit different too. In this case, you're running 4 Unholy Heat, Surgical Extraction, Spell Pierce into the Flood mod to just get rid of anything generally. So if you're running into something like Ensnaring Bridge out of the Karn the Great Creator decks or something like that, and actually there are examples of the Eldrazi decks not playing Karn the Great Creator anymore, because what happens is the Eldrazi decks are having a really hard time fighting up against these Izzet Prowess decks, and so they're opting to play less Karns because Karn is good against like some of the more unfair matchups, because it gives you that key sideboard piece you need while acting as like a soft Null Rod to stop, and Null Rod's like more of like a legacy playable card. Just think of like it acts as something that stops all artifacts, which is relatively relevant. I mean, there is a non-zero amount of Mox Opal running around. Affinity is a top 10 deck in the modern format, and just being able to stop random artifact synergies is important, but just being able to grab something out of the sideboard is good too. But the problem is Karn the Great Creator against the Izzet decks, honestly, a lot of times if you don't have the mana for it, it just comes down and does nothing, because you have to remember the Eldrazi decks don't ramp into these cards that well. The Tron decks do. So when you're able to get to 7, and you go Karn on 4 and then play a 3-drop Trinity Spear, play a 3-drop Ensnaring Bridge, that's actually pretty good, but the Eldrazi decks can't really do that. They need to ramp out into them, which is why Ugin is even a tough call in those decks, because a lot of times you're just playing 2 ofs, right? Like of that Ugin, it's really hard to justify in there, but the Tron decks are where you can do it. So if Karn the Great Creator is leaving in those decks, and you just need to be able to stop that one random sideboard piece that they're not going to be able to like consistently reapply by the time you get in for lethal, then Into the Flood Maw is honestly pretty good in terms of dealing with stuff like that. Consign to Memory is just going to be great in terms of not only dealing with the Storm decks themselves, like you're able to stop the Storm trigger, but dealing with anything colorless. Alpine Moon for some Tron shenanigans, some amount of Amulet Titan shenanigans as well. So this deck actually has a lot of bases covered in terms of how aggressive it wants to be and really can get out and underneath you. When I gotta bring this up as a mill player, when you're thinking about beating this deck, it's a really hard thing to do because Crypt Incursion isn't even necessarily that great. Only having 12 creatures out of the majority of this deck is a really tough thing to deal with when it comes to Crypt Incursion. So you honestly just want to be playing more removal versus more crypts, but the metagame right now wants you to play more Crypt Incursions. It wants you to be able to deal with energy, have removal, and have the life gain to be able to stop all of this. Like you're having to play, what's that enchantment? It's black X, and then it deals -X to all creatures, and then if a creature you control dies, you gain a life. If a creature your opponent controls, or if a creature you control dies, your opponent loses a life, but if your creature your opponent control dies, you gain a life. So that's a way to deal with Goblin Bombardment and them sacking and dealing like 1 damage to you. It just kind of undoes some of that. But regardless, the energy decks are in a good place against a lot of the metagame, but will still struggle against the energy, the prowess decks are still going to struggle against the energy decks in general. Now, energy is a whole different discussion. I feel like we used to have bans for stuff like this. This video is primarily about the Izzet decks coming up to the top, but if we look at the last 7 days, in the last 7 days, almost 30% of the metagame is Boros energy. And we need to be honest with ourselves, right? Like I've been saying this for so long. We only got a ban out of combo in the last BNR. Why? The combo deck was the only thing being able to beat Boros energy. And yeah, we should have banned something out of that, and we did. But why didn't we take something out of energy too? Right? It's not Flage, maybe it's Ocelot Pride, but it's probably Guide of Souls. Just take out Guide of Souls. Guide of Souls is the fundamental problem in this deck. Guide of Souls is the reason that this deck can get out and aggressive. Guide of Souls is the reason this deck has a mid-range plan. So yes, Izzet Prowess being in this metagame is cool. Having this kind of mid-range piece that it's able to stay out against other matchups is great. And it's great that it's able to prey on some of the top decks. But it's not great that it still loses to the top of the metagame. It still loses to Boros energy running so much removal. And yeah, like if you take a look at the Boros list right now, if you take a look at the breakdown, some amount of 3-man charms is fine, but the decks right now, they're shaving on removal, right? Like it's the Goblin Bombardment plan. They're not playing 4 of Static Prisons anymore. It's some range of 1 to 2. It's probably 2. It's 2 to 3. Let's be honest here. You're still playing 4 Galvanic Discharge and everything, and the deck really can't deal with Flage. Like once you get Flage out, you ping something down. Once you get Flage out again, this deck can't really deal with that. So you flip a Johnny, you're able to pressure the board, Galvanic Discharge, Static Prison, heck, even Goblin Bombardment does mean something. Like the deck has a lot of interaction and honestly a good amount of life gain to be able to out sustain the Izzet Prowess deck and the amount of damage that it can do. So yes, it's great. Standard legal sets are affecting modern decks again. The modern format is having powerful cards printed into it. Does that also mean that there are powerful cards being printed into these other standard legal sets? Yes, because we also see Cori-Steel Cutter and Red Aggro be a good standard deck right now. So maybe it just speaks to the power of standard right now, although the mice package isn't really in modern right now. It is in Pioneer, so that is something to be said there. But regardless, we still need changes from our Modern Horizons sets. It's cool that we got these kind of updates here. We still need to do something about Boros energy.